Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing really well. It's a beautiful day where I am, and I hope it's beautiful where you are, and I hope you're going to relax now and get yourself a beer or something really comforting to drink, because we're going to listen to the final part of our story tonight, where it reaches its conclusion, and it's incredibly exciting. So before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with the final part of our story tonight. Sylvia. Blakely was supposed to be taking part in our hockey game on the school sports field, but she was nowhere to be found. Our sports teacher, Janelle Quinton, had asked me to go and check up on her, and I found her in the changing room, staring absent-mindedly into space and looking extremely melancholic. I knew Blakely had been having it tough. It wasn't easy for her to learn that she was a child of someone that had assaulted her biological mother. I knew these sobering revelations had hit her very hard, and I really wished with all my heart that her mother, Hilda Martini, had not told her daughter the sobering truth about her real father, because Blakely did have her moments when she tended to slip into a deep depression, and I worried at times that it might spiral out of control. "What's wrong, Blakely?" I asked rather tentatively. "Mrs. Quinton wants to know where you are. She asked me to come looking for you, and to hurry up. She says you're needed on the sports field." "I don't care what Mrs. Quinton wants," said Blakely pugnaciously. "As far as I'm concerned, she can go and suck eggs. I don't want to play hockey today. I've had enough of the game anyway." "But you like hockey, Blakely, and you're very good at the sport. Why don't you want to participate?" "Because I don't," said Blakely. "Do I always have to explain everything to you, Sylvia?" I gingerly sat down next to Blakely on the changing room bench that was opposite her locker. I put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I hate him," said Blakely. "I really hate him. I hate him so much. I hate him." I assumed at once that she was talking about her biological father, as that is why she was feeling so out of sorts. Perhaps when she thought about him, she slipped into a depression, which I could understand, of course. "I know. I'm sorry. I don't blame you for feeling that way about your biological father," I said. "Anyone in your shoes would likely feel the same way. I know it's hard, and I wish to God your mother hadn't told you all about him. It's not fair. Now you brood over this all the time." "I'm not talking about my father, Sylvia. I'm talking about Nick Harding." "Who is Nick Harding?" I asked Blakely, looking somewhat bemused, for I'd never heard Blakely mention this man's name before. But then she did have the propensity to be extremely secretive at times, so why was I surprised? "Nick Harding was my boyfriend," she said. "Your boyfriend? But you never told me you had a boyfriend, Blakely," I said. "Why would you keep such a thing secret from me? We share everything together." "Well, I haven't told anyone about him, have I? We've been dating in secret. He wanted it to be that way, because he's a lot older than me, you know, and it's illegal for him to be dating someone like me. He's 35, you see. But the other day when we were at the park, he dragged me behind a bush. He sexually assaulted me, Sylvia. Just like my father, my biological father, sexually assaulted my mother. And look what happened to her. I said no, but he wouldn't stop, would he? I cried for help, but no one heard me. No one came to my rescue." "He what?" I asked, staring at my friend with wide, horrified eyes. "This 35-year-old man, who you claim was your boyfriend, dragged you behind a bush and sexually assaulted you? Are you kidding me? He can't get away with this." "I'm not kidding. Do I look as if I'm kidding? I wouldn't make something like this up, would I, Sylvia?" said Blakely, tears trickling down her cheeks, which she wiped on the back of her green cardigan. "You've got to go to the police, Blakely. He can't get away with this. He's old enough to know better. He shouldn't have been going out with a minor, let alone assault you like he did. You have to report him. A man his age can get into serious trouble. Not only for the assault, but for going out with you in the first place. I'll come with you if you like to the police station, if it makes you feel better. But you've got to go. It's very important that you do, Blakely. He can't get away with this. I'm not going to the police, Blakely growled at me. There's no way I'm going to the police. Do you understand me, Sylvia? No way. Why not, Blakely? You're being completely unreasonable and very irrational. You don't want this man to get away with what he's done to you. He's 35 years old, for goodness sake. He took advantage of a minor. He can be charged and arrested for assaulting you. If you don't go to the police, I will, I said with a resolute, determined fierceness in my voice. I was so furious that this horrible, horrible man had taken advantage of my best friend. Had Blakely not been through enough already in her young life? And now this had to happen? I now could understand why she'd recently become so withdrawn. But I wish she had told me all about this before. Why had she kept all this from me? I'm not going to the police, Blakely insisted. If you're my friend, Sylvia, you will support me on this. There are other ways we can get our back on Nick Harding. I want us to make him pay for what he did to me, and I want you to help me. What do you want to do? I asked, not liking the sound of where this conversation was going. But as Blakely's best friend, I had to listen to her. I know where Nick Harding lives, said Blakely. I've been secretly watching his house. I've been posting dog feces through the postbox, including dead rats. I even sent a letter to his girlfriend telling him what he'd done to me. But unfortunately Nick tore the letter up, so she never got to read it. He needs to be punished for what he did to me. I know on Thursdays no one is at the house. We could squeeze through a window there, mess up the entire house, send him a message that he'll never see coming. But that's breaking into someone's property. That's illegal. We can't do that. You're much better off going to the police about this. They'll sort the whole thing out. They will deal with it for you. At this, Blakely glared at me furiously. Are you my friend, Sylvia, or not? Don't you care what happens to me? Think about what happened to my biological mother. She's dead now. Dead! Because of what my father did to her. This man did the same thing to me. He dragged me into a bush and forced himself on me. I mean, this is the second time round it's happened in my family. And you want him to get away with this? Some friend you call yourself? Of course I don't want him to get away with it, Blakely. That's the whole point. That's why you need to go to the police. You shouldn't be taking the law into your own hands. You could get into trouble putting feces and rats through his postbox. And I can't believe you actually wrote a letter to his girlfriend. Goodness gracious me, that's going a stretch too far. At least he tore that up. You're playing with fire, you really are. You can't take the law into your own hands and extract some kind of revenge on your own. Honestly, where is all this going to lead? It's going to make me feel a whole lot better breaking into his house, Sylvia, and messing it up. And if you care about me at all, if you profess to be my friend, then you're going to help me. You're going to back me up. You're going to get back at this man for me, the man who violated my innocence and took advantage of me, just like my father did to my mother all those years back. I wasn't happy to agree to this crazy, nonsensical idea of Blakely's. I was 15 myself, for goodness sake, and I wasn't exactly the wisest brick in the block at the time. I could be extremely naive, and even I knew this. I persuaded myself that Blakely had been through so much stuff in her young life. It wasn't fair that a man 20 years her senior had dragged her into a bush and violated her innocence, even though she'd begged him to stop. I had to support Blakely in any way I could. After all, she was my best friend. But I was still rather hung up about the fact she refused to go to the police about this matter. I didn't question Blakely in depth about these nonsensical plans of hers that I thought were crazy. But then again, I decided to go along with them, just to support her, to show her that I did have her back. So it was on a Thursday evening I found myself at Nick Harding's house. There were no lights on in the property. We had managed to crawl through a half-open window in the kitchen. We were welcomed into the house after squeezing through the window by an extremely ebullient Dalmatian called Sender, who seemed delighted to see Blakely, for he greeted her with a rapturous welcome, as if she was a long-lost friend he hadn't seen for a long time, and as if climbing through the kitchen window was extremely normal behaviour. It felt very wrong to have broken into a stranger's house like this, and to be cruelly tearing it apart. But I kept reminding myself that this man, Nick Harding, deserved everything he was getting, as after all he had taken advantage of my friend's innocence, and was very lucky to have escaped prosecution from the police. Blakely began to shred any cushion she could find on the floor of the living room, spilling the stuffing absolutely everywhere. She angrily smashed up the television with the back of a baseball bat, hitting it so ruthlessly hard that glass shards were sprinkled everywhere like confetti. She broke apart photo frames and tore up photographs. She found an expensive bottle of red wine and poured the contents onto the pristine couch, so the stain would be near to impossible to remove. She found a can of sardines in the kitchen and began to rub the oily contents into the carpets and into the curtains, while Sender began to hungrily lick up the mess. But the stains that were left behind were not pleasant, and the place reeked of a pungent fish oil. Blakely got me to smear peanut butter all over the bed sheets. She pulled out shirts belonging to Nick Harding from the cupboard, and began to cut up all his clothes with scissors. Everything that Blakely did seemed to be extreme, and she did it with a great deal of satisfaction. Sender seemed to think that the chaos we were creating in the house was all a huge game that he was enjoying very much. He was such a goofy dog, and he probably didn't know what was really happening. Blakely had gone to the outside dumpster, just outside the kitchen door. She brought in the bin bags into the house, spilling the filthy contents over every available carpet. The place began to reek like a garbage dump. Once we'd done enough damage in the house, it looked as if it had been hit by a bomb. Expensive ornaments and all of Nick's clothes were lying in shreds across the floor. Blakely emptied out the contents of the refrigerator so that Sender could get his teeth into some juicy fillet steak, which he gobbled up hungrily. So I think our intrusion into Nick Harding's house had been a source of great entertainment for the geeky dog. "We mustn't take anything from this house," Blakely had said. "We cannot make it look like a burglary. Nick needs to understand that he has to pay for what he did to me. I want the message to ring loud and clear to him." I was glad to see after we'd broken into Nick Harding's house and left a great deal of chaos in our wake, that finally Blakely returned to being the fun-loving person I knew. A spark had come back into her eyes, and I think she felt as if she'd got her adequate revenge on Nick Harding. If she was happy, so was I. One day as I was nonchalantly walking down the street to get to Blakely's house, I was going to catch up with her. She'd asked me to go to the park with her, to walk Mrs. Mackenzie's dog Teddy. All of a sudden, a white van, a utility van it seemed, pulled up beside me. And before I could do anything, someone jumped out of the van. The next thing I knew was a powerful hand was clasped over my mouth, probably to stop me from screaming. I was thrown into the back of a white van. It was a utility van. But it all happened so quickly and seemed so surreal. In fact, when something like that happens to you, you don't believe it's happening, so it's difficult to react at all. I was shocked to discover that Blakely was also in the back of the van. Her hands were tied and there was a scarf around her eyes, which meant she couldn't physically see. Otherwise, maybe she could have possibly managed to escape from the utility van when I had been thrown in. I quickly removed the scarf from around her eyes and the back of her hands. I was relieved to see that I was not alone in this utility van. It's always better when there's someone there with you. I knew we'd both been kidnapped, but I couldn't understand why, or what was going on, until Blakely told me it was Nick Harding that had thrown us into his van. "I think he knows we broke into his house that evening. He's trying to get even with us. He knows I put dog feces through his postbox. He knows I sent him those dead rats, and wrote his girlfriend that letter." I shook my head. "I knew we should have gone to the police to report what he did to you, Blakely, but you wouldn't listen, would you? And now this happens. I knew it wouldn't end well." What if that man violates the both of us? What if he harms us? What if he kills us? Have you even stopped to think about that? You hear about predators like him all over the television. People who are never seen again. Where do you think he's going to take us, Blakely? All kinds of horrifying scenarios were forming less than pleasant images in my head. I don't know, said Blakely. I have absolutely no idea. But I've never seen him so angry. You should have seen the way he looked at me. I've never seen him look like that before. I have no idea what he's going to do when he opens this van. But I promise you this. I'll be ready for him, Sylvia. I'll kick him between the legs to subdue him. It's the best place to bring down a man. My mother told me that. Then we must run for our lives. Do you understand it? Run for our lives. I'm faster than you are, Sylvia, so I'll hit him really hard between the legs to disable him. He'll be doubled over in pain. That will give us a flying start. Everything's going to be fine, Sylvia, I promise you, she said, giving me an encouraging nudge. I got us into this. I'll get us out of this, I promise. I remember feeling sick to my stomach. I could taste the vile nausea rising up in the back of my throat, and my belly was whirling around, as if I could feel it was about to bring up the contents of my stomach. I had horrible thoughts about Nick Harding, and what this insidiously evil man was capable of doing to us. I tried my hardest not to think about things too deeply, but I was filled with a sense of impending dread. Nick Harding's white utility van seemed to rattle along the roads for ages. There were bottles of water in the back of the van, so luckily me and Blakely were able to ward off dehydration. I wondered if the water had been left for us deliberately, as if Nick Harding had planned our abduction. It felt as if we were stuck in this utility van forever, and it was so claustrophobic. I'm not sure how long we were inside it, but every minute seemed to last a single lifetime, and it was so sticky and unpleasantly hot. But I'm quite sure that some of the heat I was experiencing was from my own sense of trepidation. A long while later, we could tell the utility van was no longer driving down smooth ribbons of asphalt. Everything had changed significantly. The terrain had become a lot more rugged, as the van began to judder and jolt, as if it was driving over rough, dirt-covered roads dotted with pebbles. It would seem that when Nick Harding had grabbed us, he had managed to confiscate both our cell phones. How he did this, I have no idea, so we couldn't call for help. Indeed, the man had been quick in his abduction of us, so quick, in fact, that neither of us had time to react. But over this long drive, we had plenty of time to think. All Blakely and I had talked about was how we would escape from the van once Nick Harding opened the back door. Wherever he was taking us, I could sense instinctively that it was way off the beaten track. I could feel my skin beginning to prickle. I could sense it wouldn't be long before we reached our destination and would have to face our abductor. I began to inwardly pray that Blakely could manage to subdue him. She was very confident that she could. I hoped she could do it for long enough so that we would manage to escape. I knew for Nick Harding to have abducted us like this, he must be one very irate man, and it occurred to me that maybe he had had cameras in his house and had been able to see who it was that had messed his place up, which was why he had abducted us, to make us pay for what we'd done. Why hadn't I thought about this before? We possibly should have carefully covered our heads when we vandalised his property, so we wouldn't be easily identified. It didn't help, of course, that Blakely had put dog feces and dead rats through his postbox for days. She'd also written to his girlfriend to warn her that Nick Harding had a liking for young girls. Nick Harding probably thought they were trying to ruin his life for him, and who could blame him for assuming that, as Blakely's behaviour had been rather extreme. The question was, how would this man take his revenge out on us? I began to fear the worst, for a cornered animal can go straight for the jugular, and things might not end well for us, but I tried not to think about that too much. All of a sudden the utility van came to a sudden juddering stop. Everything was serenely quiet for a moment. We could hear Nick Harding's driver's side door open, the sound of his boots crunching the pebbles beneath his feet as he walked over to the rear end of the utility van. Then it happened, the quintessential moment I had been dreading. The door opened slowly, and Blakely was telling me, "Run! Run!" I managed to jump out of the van, my heart pounding at 100 miles an hour, the adrenaline coursing through my system that seemed to give my legs the edge, like that of a marathon runner, because I ran like I've never run before. I guess Blakely had managed to kick Nick between the legs, because I looked over my shoulders for a brief second and could see Nick Harding bending over, doubled over in pain. I could hear him saying, "You bitch! What the hell is your problem, Blakely? Why are you trying to ruin my life?" I could see he'd parked his van against a quaint-looking cabin that might possibly belong to him, but it was clearly empty, and no one was around. In the distance I could see a lofty grove of trees, and I instinctively ran towards them, as if they were my friends, as fast as I could, not looking behind me once, because I was almost afraid of what I would see. When I arrived in the woods, I hid behind a tree for a brief moment. My breath was raspy, and the sweat was pouring down my back. I was waiting to hear if Blakely would finally catch up with me, but she didn't. Where was she? I became unduly worried and very disquieted, especially when there was no sign of her. Supposing Nick Harding had managed to grab her, drag her into the cabin. What if he was hurting and harming her right now? Who knows what a man who's been pushed to the edge was capable of? I didn't even want to think about this. The contents of my stomach were threatening to reappear, and I was struggling to fight off the waves of nausea. I knew if my best friend was in trouble, I had to help her in any way I could. I may have been afraid of Nick Harding, but I couldn't abandon Blakely like this. For what kind of fair-weather friend would I be to her if I did that? I crept back cautiously through the trees and across the field, and then I ran towards Blakely. She was standing over the body of Nick Harding, and there was an expression of great contempt on her face. The body of Nick Harding looked as if it was not moving, and the first thing that came into my mind was, is he dead? "What did you do?" I cried out in horror. "You killed him, Blakely! You killed him! Why would you do that?" "I just kicked him between the legs," Blakely assured me, "and then he crumpled over. I grabbed a piece of firewood from that stash over there. I knocked him over the head. But you're right. I think I might have killed him. I must have hit him way too hard. But it was self-defense. We didn't know what he was going to do to us, did we?" She grabbed me quite violently by the arm. "We've got to get out of here now," she said. "But we have to call an ambulance first," I said. "It's not right to leave him here like this. He needs help, can't you see?" "Are you kidding me?" said Blakely, staring at me defiantly. "He's beyond help now, isn't he? We could be potentially charged with his murder, Sylvia. Now come on, let's get the hell out of here before anybody sees us." It was as we began to run through the woods. A while afterwards we could hear feet, heavy feet pounding the ground behind us. They appeared powerful, and I don't think I've ever been so disquieted and so scared in my entire life. I began to wonder if Nick Harding, who I assumed was dead, had only just blacked out for a while and was now giving us chase. And if that were the case, we were in serious trouble, because we'd probably provoked him to even more anger, and there was no telling what such an irate man might do to us. We would be powerless against him. "Hide!" said Blakely, grabbing me by the arm so hard that I almost winced. "I think it's Nick Harding. I think he's not dead. He's coming for us. I don't think we killed him. Let's hide, because if he finds us, he's going to hurt us. Believe me, he's going to hurt us." At Blakely's ominous doomsday words, I didn't waste any time in taking cover behind the trunk of a large tree. I was terrified that I'd be seen. My heart was pounding violently in my chest, and truly, even at 15 years old, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was so terrified that Nick Harding would discover us. Maybe he had a weapon at his disposal or something. I tried not to think about that. I could hear the sound of ponderous feet getting closer and closer and closer, far too close for comfort. We heard a loud owl hoot that at that time of the afternoon seemed incongruous to me. And that was when we both saw him. And it was not Nick Harding we were seeing. For a moment the sight I was beholding was so utterly astonishing, so mind-boggling, that I thought my trauma was now making me see things that weren't actually there. I had to be hallucinating. This could not be real. A Bigfoot was standing in the woods. It was strapping, a male Bigfoot, who was carrying what looked like a sack of potatoes on his back. But as I focused more clearly on what he was actually carrying, I realized to my abject horror that he was carrying the body of Nick Harding on his back. And my first thought was, oh my God, this creature is going to eat Nick Harding. I realized the Bigfoot must have seen Blakely hit him with a piece of firewood on the back of his head, and thought that Nick Harding would make for an easy, very quick and efficient meal. The Bigfoot was possibly about 9 foot tall. He was gargantuan in every way. I've never seen such huge shoulders on any living thing. He was substantially sized, with a torso that was impressive and was ripped with muscle. He was covered in long flowing dark hair, which appeared to have auburn highlights, and when he glanced briefly in our direction, I could see he had the distinctive face of a man. I was so terrified that he might sense or smell our presence in the woodgrove, so I held my breath tightly, hoping to God he wouldn't realize we were there. As he stood there, he let out an owl hoot, and in the distance there was a response, another owl hoot. Moments later, I heard heavy feet, twigs being crunched furiously, leaves rustling earnestly. At first I saw a shadowy form, a silhouette that I couldn't quite make out because it was so ambiguously indefinite. But it got clearer and clearer as it moved towards the male Bigfoot, and then I realized it was another Bigfoot. It was a female. She was about a foot smaller than the male, but also extremely powerful in stature. She approached the male and began to speak earnestly to him. He replied to her in a booming voice. She nodded at him, and the male Bigfoot suddenly removed Nick Harding from his back and placed the man on the forest floor. The body didn't flinch, it didn't move. There was no sign of the chest going up and down, and in that moment I was certain that Nick Harding was dead. There was no doubt about it in my mind, and the horror of what Blakely had done hit me hard, like a violent blow across the head. The female Bigfoot bent down to examine Nick. She put her thick fingers around his neck and then felt for a pulse, as if she was also determining whether he was alive or not. They began to talk together, very earnestly, in a very strange, unorthodox language, backwards and forwards. I knew they were discussing Nick Harding, but what they were saying I could not be sure. Kila kikakwa, sukopota, likasikwana, potolona, likati. Ah, la shagotwase, helambelate, asakolati la binasikasho hasafa, hikati hopoloti. Soon they came to some kind of agreement, but in the beginning the male Bigfoot had been shaking his head on numerous occasions as if he was saying no, but finally he nodded, while the female Bigfoot walked away, returning from whence she'd come. The male let out a huge, exasperated sigh, and then threw Nick Harding back onto his back, and the large man looked so tiny and insignificant on the Bigfoot's shoulders, as if he was no more than a doll. Once the Bigfoot had sashayed through the woodgrove, me and Blakely stared at each other, in horror. I was the first one to cut the silence with a knife, with my words, of course. "Did we just see that?" I asked Blakely. My friend's dark eyes stood up on stalks and she said, "That was a male Bigfoot. We saw 2 Bigfoots, a female and a male. And they were talking long and hard about Nick Harding, but I don't know what they were saying. But I think he's dead. I think they might be going to eat him. No one must ever know about this, Sylvia, do you understand? In a way, it's a good thing because his body will never be found. Nobody will ever know what's happened to him. How can you say that? How can you be so cruel, Blakely? I can't believe you're being like this. We're talking about a man who has died because of you." "Let's not go there now. We need to get out of here now. Do you understand that? We need to get away from this place." I nodded. There was no point in arguing with Blakely, and together we began to walk through the woods. There were arrow marks with signs that said to Ashford Road. We followed the signs, and sure enough, we came to a substantial-sized asphalt road. I felt immeasurable relief in seeing it. At least we could potentially wave someone down and hopefully get a lift. As I was about to walk through the last trees that fringed the edge of the road, I could hear something being dragged across the road. I stopped short in my tracks and looked at Blakely with wide eyes. "Did you hear that? Someone's there! Someone's there!" We could not believe what we were seeing. It was the male Bigfoot again. He didn't know we were there, but we watched him drag a tree branch across the road. It was a branch that would have had to get you out of your car to remove, and maybe that was the whole idea. The Bigfoot then put the body of Nick Harding on the side of the road, and he promptly glided away. And that was when I realized exactly what he was doing. Far from wanting to eat Nick Harding for dinner, the Bigfoot was trying to get the man help. Maybe he wasn't dead after all, or maybe he just wanted his dead body to be recovered by someone who cared about him. Once the Bigfoot had gone, me and Blakely walked down the road as fast as we could, and luckily the road stretched out into a labyrinth of other roads. In the long distance we could hear the ambulance sirens, so I suspected at long last a passing driver had called 911 when he discovered the unconscious body of Nick Harding lying by the side of the road, or the dead body, of course. I was happy he was getting help, but I rather suspected it was far too late. I felt aggrieved that Blakely had attacked Nick Harding so fiercely. She had just said she'd kick him between the legs to disable him for long enough for us to get away, but she'd gone a step too far, whacking him across the head far too hard, so much so that she'd actually killed him. I told myself that Nick Harding was a very bad man. After all, he had attacked Blakely, so maybe he had met up with the karma that was doled out to him by the natural world. Me and Blakely managed to hitchhike a few lifts back home. The drivers who took us home and gave us lifts actually scolded us, telling us it wasn't safe for young girls to be taking lifts from strangers. One older man told us that back in his day, he used to hitchhike frequently. "It was much safer back then," he assured us, "but not anymore. You girls really need to watch your backs. I'm afraid to say there's some nasty predators out there these days who take advantage of young ladies such as yourself. You hear about it on the news all the time, and I certainly would hate to see the two of you becoming victims to someone like that. Do your parents even know that you hitchhike?" I shook my head solemnly. The old man nodded. "I suspected as much, because I'm quite sure if they knew what you were doing today, they would not be impressed. Most youngsters these days take Ubers to get around. It would be wise for the both of you to do the same." I assured him that we would never hitchhike ever again, and I meant it, of course. It was a day or so later that Blakely uncharacteristically admitted the truth to me. She appeared to be hanging her head in shame. "I've got something I need to get off my chest," she told me, "and you're not going to like it, I'm afraid, Sylvia." At the time we were sitting in our favourite spot, under the sycamore tree at school, eating our sandwiches together at lunchtime. "I'm really screwed up, you know. I've done some stupid things in my life, and this is the craziest," she told me. I rolled my eyes. "Tell me about it," I said. "We should never have broken into Nick Harding's house like we did. It was a very stupid thing for us to do. If we hadn't wrecked his house up, and if you hadn't sent that horrible letter to his girlfriend, then he probably wouldn't have abducted us like he did. He might be dead because of what you did. I'm sorry, Blakely, but I can't get my head around any of this. I'm having trouble sleeping at night. Even my mother notices something's up with me. She keeps asking me what's going on, what's wrong. I want to tell her what happened, but I can't, because if I told her our preposterous story, she'd probably freak the hell out. She also wouldn't believe the part about the Bigfoots. She'd think I was making it all up." "Of course you can't tell her a thing," said Blakely. "Are you crazy, Sylvia? Don't bring your mother into any of this. And don't worry about not being able to get to sleep at night, because I didn't kill Nick Harding. He's not dead." "But how can you possibly know that?" I asked. "I phoned up the hospital. I pretended to be a relative, didn't I? They said he was concussed, but doing absolutely fine, although apparently he can't remember what happened to him. A driver found him on the side of the road where the Bigfoot left him, and he sustained a bleed on the brain, I believe. I think the Bigfoot probably saved his life, Sylvia. I thought the thing wanted to eat Mr. Harding. Turned out he wanted to help him. So it's good news all round, isn't it? I don't think I've ever felt so relieved as I did when Blakely shared this with me. If Nick Harding was still alive, it would alleviate the weight of my guilt. "Sorry, you said you had something to tell me that I'm not going to like," I said, taking a bite of my ham and cheese sandwich. "What is it, Blakely?" Blakely looked extremely uncomfortable. She looked down at her peanut butter and jelly sandwich and suddenly seemed to lose her appetite. She threw the sandwich back into her lunchbox and slammed down the lid. It wasn't like Blakely to lose her appetite like this, so whatever she had to tell me, it couldn't be good. "What is it?" I asked softly. "Please don't hate me, Sylvia," she said. "I couldn't hate you," I said, realizing that she had something quite terrible to tell me, and I braced myself for the worst. "Nick Harding never sexually assaulted me, Sylvia. I made that all up." "What?" I said, dropping my sandwich on the ground and staring at my friend in horror. "You made this all up, Blakely! Why would you do such a wicked, treacherous thing? Are you insane? What you did is evil! Downright evil!" "But I really liked him. I really did, Sylvia. I met him at the park when I was walking Teddy, Mrs. Mackenzie's dog. Nick was walking Sender. The two dogs, well, they got on so well together. Nick would sit on the park bench, and I would sit down next to him, and we would talk. One day I asked him if he'd go to the parlour with me and have ice cream. I wanted him to know I really liked him, and I really fancied him like that." "What did he say?" I asked. "He gave me the brush off, Sylvia. He told me I was 15 years old and that he was 35 and was far too old for me. He told me he wasn't interested in getting involved with me, and that although I was a sweet young lady, it was a felony to be involved with someone so young." "So you made up the fact that he assaulted you, Blakely? That is seriously sick. What the hell is wrong with you? He was a decent man, and you defamed him with all your cruel things that you did to him. How could you do that?" "I told you I messed up. I felt so angry, Sylvia. I felt rejected. I felt so hurt and so jealous when I realised he had a girlfriend. I wanted him to pay for rejecting me, which was why I got you to mess up the house with me. I guess he must have had hidden cameras, as he knew it was both of us that messed up his place. I don't think he was really going to hurt us. He's not like that as a person. I think he was going to have tough words with us and tell us to stay the hell away from him. But I guess I just panicked. I lashed out. I couldn't help it." I stared at Blakely in stunned disbelief. I couldn't believe that she had duped me to doing this. I had helped her mess up an innocent man's home, and all the time he'd done nothing wrong. It made me sick to my stomach. "Blakely, you nearly killed this man," I reminded her. "You didn't have to whack him across the back of the head so violently in the way you did. I only helped you mess up his house because I thought he was a perverted predator preying on your innocence. And all the time he was a jolly decent person. I feel sick to my stomach about all this. I really do." "I know. I'm sorry, Sylvia. I really am. Please don't be angry with me. Please, I'm begging you. You're my best friend. Without you, I don't have anyone." I sighed. "You have big problems, Blakely. You seriously need to get help for yourself. Go to a therapist or something. I know you've had a dysfunctional childhood, but what you did to Nick Harding is inexcusable. Mud sticks, you know. And if you'd falsely accused him of sexually assaulting you, you could have completely destroyed his life. You do realise that?" "You're right. I'm a mess," Blakely admitted. "But I promise you I am going to get help. I know I need it." The following day after school, with my pocket money, I bought a large bouquet of flowers from the florist and some chocolates and pretended to be a relative of Nick Harding. I visited him in hospital, as I was convicted with so much guilt. I was hoping that by meeting him in person I could apologise to him for messing up his house. I wanted to tell him the truth about Blakely's upbringing, and how her insecurities had made her behaviour very juvenile, and how I had believed her claims that he had assaulted her. But when I went to see him in hospital, he had absolutely no idea who I was, and looked at me very blankly. Luckily his girlfriend was by his side, and greeted me warmly. "Are you Claire?" she asked me. Nick told me all about you. It's so nice of you to visit. I'm sorry if he doesn't appear to recognise you at the moment. Don't take it personally. His memory is very vague at the moment. Unfortunately, he took a nasty bang to the back of his head, and it's affected his memory quite badly." She looked at the flowers and chocolates I'd brought along with me, and said, "Nick, isn't this kind of Claire? If you can't remember Claire, it's your brother's daughter. She's come all the way from Seattle to see you. Isn't that right, Claire? You're 15, if I remember right." I nodded, and thought it was best to pretend I was Claire. "Nick is going to be all right, isn't he?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely. And his memory will definitely come back in time, although it's unlikely he's going to remember what actually happened to him. Would you believe it, he was found by the side of a rural country road, close to the cabin we own. And thank God a kindly stranger picked him up and took him to the hospital, because he could have died, you know. That bleed on his brain was very serious. I knew he was going to the cabin, but what he was doing on that country road, all on his own like that, God only knows. And maybe we'll never know." "It's very kind of you, Claire," said Nick, "to bring me these flowers and chocolates. You must forgive me for not knowing who you are or recognising you. But my memory's taken quite a beating. But as Polly says, I'll be as right as rain in no time at all." Over the years, me and Blakely saw Nick Harding on many occasions in town with his girlfriend Polly, whom is now his wife, I believe. He'd look right through us, so I genuinely believe he has no memory of abducting us in his white utility van. And as Blakely's mother has always said, some things are best not remembering, and I think she's right about that. These days both Blakely and her mother have got their lives back together again. They both visited a remarkable therapist who has enabled both Blakely and Hilda Martini to come to terms with the demons in their lives. They have loving relationship together now, and Blakely is no longer the jealous, self-centered, insecure person she once was. So miracles can and do happen. I still often think about those two Bigfoots that probably saved Nick Harding's life, and in my opinion, they were angels sent by God. Too bad that Nick Harding will probably never know that he was saved by a Bigfoot. So there you are. That's my story.